Okay, looks like we are in. Hi everybody, welcome to today's session of UPSC Buffet by Gallant IAS. Today we'll be discussing some interesting tricks and traps that UPSC usually sets. So since we have completed all the subjects of the last 5 years PYQs and we have gone through the trends from the previous years, like the last 10 years of questions. So the subject-wise things are already done. We have covered everything in detail, including the concepts and including how to approach these questions logically and how to apply the knowledge that you have and also how to plan your studies accordingly. Now we will be looking into certain kinds of questions, the patterns in which UPSC usually sets these questions, which actually makes these questions slightly difficult, or in fact these are the patterns that you should be extra cautious about. Even if you have the knowledge, these are the kind of mistakes that usually aspirants make, and also if you look at it, these are the kind of patterns in which UPSC is asking questions. So if you are well aware about these things, you can actually improve your accuracy, improve your attempts and things like that. So I'll explain everything in detail so you'll get a better idea. So I'd like to call this as UPSC's mind games, and you have to watch out for these traps. I don't want to alarm you with anything, but I just wanted to make you feel like these are very important, because about 10 to roughly from 2 to 10 questions you will be getting every year that will be following this pattern. So apart from the subject knowledge you have, you need to be wary of these kind of patterns that UPSC sets. So this will make you you'll get more control over your attempts, and you'll have a more authoritative approach when it comes to actual examination. So you don't have to worry about anything. I'm just giving you a heads up on what to look out for. So the common patterns, many of you might know few of these things, but I want to consolidate everything and illustrate everything in real time, how this works. So I would say there are 5 major patterns. There are more patterns if you look at it, but key patterns that have remained consistent in the last 15 years. That I would like to call them, I would like to classify them into these 5 headers. First of them is seemingly accurate statements. If you look at it without a factual knowledge, or if you have absolutely no idea, things may seem very right at first sight. These are mainly included in these science and technology questions, where all options seems right, but you have to be extra cautious, because UPSC will be laying some key aspects in that, and not every option will be right. So this is very much evident in the science and technology questions, especially like application of some technology, like radar application in 2024 question. Also about copper smelting plants. Everything that is given in the option seems right only, but the issue is that there will be some key elements, some qualitative factors, some hidden extreme statements. So you have to be very careful about that. Then also the other things like share of waters, which I will be explaining in detail. You don't have to worry about that, but I just want to give you a heads up on what to look out for. So seemingly accurate statements, in first reading they may seem right only. You cannot logically counter it just like that, but I am giving you a heads up because there is a pattern in which UPSC will be sticking on to few things and eliminating few things. Like best example would be the radar application, in which all of the 3 statements, if you look at it, may seem likely, but not all the statements are right. Only 2 of them will be right. Same way the copper smelting plant question, which I have already discussed earlier. And the next very important one will be interchanging the keywords. This is a classic thing, that instead of high clouds they will be giving low clouds, instead of increase decrease. This is especially true in economy. And when it comes to bonds, instead of selling, the statement will be buying. So those sort of things you should be very careful about, and this is very much important in economy, because many of the aspirants tend to confuse these concepts, because economy is basically increase or decrease based on some other factor, and UPSC will most likely be giving you 4 statements, and one of them will be regarding, say, selling, buying, or increase or decrease of something with respect to other. But you have to pay very close attention and underline the keywords, whether it's increase or decrease, and don't confuse it in the heat of the examination. This is one common mistake every aspirant makes, even if you have a good understanding about the concept. This is very true in economy, and these days this trend and this sort of questions are very much evident in geography as well. I'll be explaining that also. Then comes the switching of dates and numbers. In history, science and technology, there will be a switching of dates. The dates that they are given won't be random. That date will be having some significance. The best example I would say is 2023 question, in which the date of Constituent Assembly was given as the starting date of Constituent Assembly, or the Constitution of Drafting Committee was given as the completion date of Constitution. Okay, so the date itself is valid. You might have heard about the date, but the events are switched. So that's one important thing to note. Also, 8 scheduled languages. UPSC has played very well with these sort of questions in 2024 and not much in 2025. But since 2024 pattern is a very universal pattern, we can expect such questions in future. So I am putting more emphasis on the 2024 question rather than the 2025, because 2024 UPSC has played very well with the details, and you can see almost all these patterns in the 2024 question. And also in science and technology, something that is very relevant, like the IRNSS satellite, the number of satellites in the geostationary as well as the geosynchronous orbit, those things were switched. Instead of 4, 3, like the numbers were 4 and 3, those were switched. So those sort of questions are very relevant when it comes to concepts in science and technology that are very, very current relevant. IRNSS is very important and very relevant, and similar thing can be expected in GSLV, PSLV, all of which I have explained earlier. The stages will be switched. Instead of the first solid stage, it will be given as first liquid stage, things like that. So switching of data numbers, they won't be giving you inaccurate or random details. The details will be relevant only, but their orders will be switched. So pay close attention to that. Then the classic one in polity, that is anybody, anything that is mentioned, anything that is been asked in the question will be having a keyword as, or one option as mentioned in the Constitution. We have to be very careful because not everything is mentioned in the Constitution, and most of the things that are being asked by UPSC won't be mentioned. But don't be fooled by that. Certain things find mention in the Constitution, especially in the glossary of the Constitution. So you have to go through those glossary, which I will be explaining later, glossary, and find that okay, these things are mentioned clearly in the Constitution, and assume rest of the things is not mentioned. Okay, so that's how you should be studying. Then the classic one in polity and economy, changing of the organization. Instead of RBI or instead of SEBI, in most cases instead of SEBI RBI will be given, okay, or vice versa. So this is one thing you have to be careful. And the classic one, the ministries. Ministry of Corporate Affairs. I've reiterated that multiple times in our polity revision part that Ministry of Corporate Affairs is like the underdog or the underrated ministry, and many of times we might confuse bodies like Serious Fraud Investigation Office is under Ministry of Finance. We may think that okay, Enforcement Directorate is under Ministry of Finance, so maybe Serious Fraud Investigation Office is also under Ministry of Finance, but it's not. It's under Ministry of Corporate Affairs. And same way, in most of the questions we will be having a National Companies Law Appellate Tribunal, things like that. You might think that it will be under Ministry of Finance or Commerce, but it's under Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Same way, another ministry that is been usually switched is Ministry of Environment and Environment, Forest and Climate Change with Ministry of Earth Sciences. Many of times we might think that it's Ministry of Environment that is the body, but Ministry of Earth Sciences is equally important, and many of times it's under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. So those two ministries are very important, and I would recommend you try to find a list of bodies that are under Ministry of Corporate Affairs and Ministry of Earth Sciences and try to understand them. And if any question is being asked, and you can easily decipher it, because many a times without the factual knowledge this is slightly tricky to approach, but having a critical aspect, critical thinking really helps, especially in case of these RBI questions. When somebody is attached to RBI, or if the chairman is appointed by the RBI governor, things like that is being asked, you have to be careful, and you have to look through whether SEBI or any other body makes for a good cause or can be a good substitute for that question. Then good chance that RBI won't be the answer. So that's all about the introduction to the session. Now we'll be seeing this pattern in real time. So I have divided everything subject wise so that you can get a good idea on how these questions are asked, and it's not limited to these subjects. I won't say that apart from this defined in Constitution, none of this is strictly limited to these subjects. An application, like everything or every sort of patterns can be seen across the subjects. Nothing is limited to subjects, but some patterns are more prone or more widely seen in certain subjects, like increase and decrease, or selling, buying in economy, and things like that. Other than that, this is a uniform pattern applied across the subjects. So let's start with the geography part. Like I said, It's a 2022 PYQ. The question is high clouds and low clouds. High clouds primarily reflect solar radiation, cool surface of the earth. If you just ignore the high cloud or low cloud part, these two statements are right only. There are, whether it be low cloud or high cloud, they have these sort of qualities. So the statement itself is right. But you have to be careful whether it's actually the high clouds or the low clouds. The quick and easy thing, in order to make a question difficult or to put a question, it's very easy to switch the things, especially when these high and low clouds are given. It's very easy for the examiner to frame that question. They don't have to work that much. But for an aspirant, that gets slightly tricky if they don't have a good factual base. So if questions like high clouds, low clouds, cold current, warm currents are asked, be extra cautious, go through the statements very clearly. Otherwise, you can make a mistake, because you might read it and you may feel like it's a right statement because it's right only. But the issue is the things that are being mentioned and in reference to will be, interchanged. So we have to be very careful. This is a classic example. This question, the descriptions are switched between high clouds and low clouds. The first statement is mentioning about the low clouds and the second statement is mentioning about the high clouds. So it's a classic question, and the answer is neither one and nor two. And one very important thing, they can switch these things and give, and the question keyword will be which of the given statements are incorrect. Then again it goes through another loop. So very that's a easy thing to do would be to underline these keywords, high clouds, low clouds, and this underline whether it's a correct or incorrect statement. These are silly things, but these can make or break your prelims game. So that's why I'm re-emphasizing, reiterating these things. Don't take these things for granted, because these can backfire. Many a times, aspirants who have even gone through the interview have made these sort of silly mistakes and they couldn't clear the cutoff, and they have just missed the cutoff by few marks, just 2 or 3 marks. So don't make these mistakes. It's very, very important. Especially in the heat of the examination, you will be having a confusion, a brain fog. So you have to practice it prior, and underlining is the way to go. So that's one thing. Another thing, the cold and warm currents. This is a repeated pattern, and UPSC will be asking because it's a core theme. When it comes to geography, climatology and oceanography, these are the core themes you need to be having an idea about. So UPSC is expecting you to understand these things. Especially geography is becoming more and more relevant, and more questions are being asked, and those questions are also very factual in nature and very technical. So have a good idea about these. Also, this deviation of isotherms, especially whether they deviate to north or south, it's very easy. When framing a question, it's very easy to give south instead of north. So they don't have to worry much about that. But you have to be very careful, and especially asking about these isothermal maps, you have to be very careful about the month also, because it could be given January or July. So a switch can be happening there also. So this question, that isotherms deviate to the north over the ocean and to south over the continent. This is right only. And the presence of this statement, the presence of cold ocean currents, this is the issue. Because instead of cold ocean currents, to make this statement right, it should have been warm ocean currents. That's the reason why these isotherms are bending towards the north, because more warmer waters are found at more higher latitudes. So this is the wrong statement. The cold ocean currents are instead of cold ocean currents, it should be warm ocean currents. But in a superficial reading, you might think that, okay, Gulf Stream, North Atlantic drift make North Atlantic Ocean warmer. Okay, this is actually warmer. Again, another thing. So this is a wrong statement, and these sort of questions you have to be extra careful, because it's very easy to switch things. So the answer would be A only for this particular question. Then moving on, same pattern. See, this pattern is very much repeated by UPSC, especially regarding these isothermal maps. And I highly recommend you make it very thorough. Okay, don't take the risk of or don't put yourself in a position where you have to be thinking logically. You have to put in more logical effort there. This is strictly factual. Learn it, and also it's not, I would say, you don't have to mug up anything. You can just picturize it and learn it conceptually only. It's not that difficult of a concept, but don't ignore these areas, because this is a clear pattern that UPSC is sticking to, especially in geography. Again, the temperature contrast between continents and ocean is greater during summer than winter. Classic mix-up. It's actually, contrast is higher in winter than summer. So that's it. And you can easily arrive at the answer. Especially in the statement question, it's very easy to arrive at the answer if you can get one state. If you can actually find that one statement is wrong. These statement questions are the easiest. So this is also the wrong statement, and we can easily arrive at the answer as D. So stick to these patterns. Instead of summer, there will be winter, and instead of hot, warm, ocean currents, and bending towards north or south, and high clouds, low clouds. So that's a classic situation. Moving on, then this is one area where I've told you that seemingly right or seemingly harmless sort of things can go wrong, especially in geography. The first statement itself, if you don't know the fact, this seems like very right, because amount of water in rivers and lakes is much more than amount of groundwater. If you try to picturize it, you may think that rivers and lakes are like a huge bodies, and the kind we can visibly picturize them. Whereas in the case of groundwater, since we are not seeing them, we don't know the extent of it. So if you don't know actually, you may think that okay, this is a right statement, but in fact it's much lesser. The groundwater is much higher than that of the rivers. In fact, atmospheric water vapor is much higher than that of the rivers. So that is counterintuitive but factual. Remember that. And this statement is wrong. And the amount of water in polar ice caps is more than that of groundwater. This seems right only, and that's right. So seemingly right statements, pay close attention, especially in geography. I wouldn't say you have to be very skeptical, because that goes against our usual logic. Because in our logic, we are assessing things based on our general understanding, general sense of right or wrong. So I would recommend you to be extra critical when it comes to geography questions, and don't stick to that thing in other areas. So this is how you devise a strategy where you will be having more command over things. You won't be going into the examination with a fixed strategy or fixed approach, fixed logic or anything. You have to be very dynamic, and this dynamic nature is what sets apart from normal aspirants and ones that clear this examination. So have very critical mindset when it comes to seemingly accurate statements in geography, but not in any other areas. But you have to be very careful that UPSC can ask questions like these. Okay, I'm just giving you a heads up. You don't have to be very extra critical about everything and go, and I'm not asking you to go against your logic, because that is counterproductive in entirety. So that's not the way to go. But in geography, you have to be careful, especially in these very factual questions which are explicitly given in NCERT, okay, and core areas like these. So that's all. And one more thing, this is regarding palm oil. Again, this seems like a seemingly accurate thing, especially if you have some knowledge, because palm oil is native to Southeast Asia. At first reading, you may think that yes, most of the palm oil producing countries are from Southeast Asia, where Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. They are the largest producers. Thailand, they are the largest producers of palm oil, and you may think that they have become the largest producers because this palm oil is native to that place. But it's not in reality, and I would give you another heads up. Most of the plantation crops that are grown are not at all native to their own places. For example, rubber in India or rubber in Malaysia. These plantation crops are definitely introduced because of the climatic factors that favored, climatic and geographical factors that favored that particular area, and the colonial introduction of that. So any plantation crop is being asked, and whether they are, even if they are the largest producers, most likely they won't be native. These plantation crops, mostly would have originated in South America only. They are being introduced into the New World from the Old World, okay, by these colonial powers like Portuguese and British, etc., British, Dutch, etc. So most plantation crops, even if these countries or regions are largest producers, most likely they won't be native to that place. And that's the one logic that you only need to solve this question. But if you think about it very factually, that palm oil is being produced by these Southeast Asian countries, and you may think that okay, they are the largest producers because it's native to that place. No, that's not the case. Okay, so this question is very easy if you have that logic, and you can easily arrive at the answer as B. Pay close attention to questions like these. This belongs to the category of seemingly accurate questions. Okay, and at first sight, if you have some knowledge that these are the largest producers, you may take it wrong. You have to be extra cautious, and remember, these are the patterns that are repeated. Then we'll be moving on to the polity side of things. Here, not much diversity is there. The classic thing will be mixing up of articles, mixing up of dates, and the whether or not they are defined in the constitution. These are the patterns in polity. Other than that, there is not much confusion arising out of polity. Most of the questions will be straightforward only. This actually in the examination I marked it wrong because I actually I think I didn't attend it because I got really confused with this question, because the question constitution the question was asking about the 8 scheduled languages, and it was asking not just about the recent one, because nobody will be keeping track of each and every amendment, especially to something like 8 schedule. And I obviously didn't have, like, I was confused between this 1992 and 92nd Constitutional Amendment Act, because in the 92nd Constitutional Amendment Act, we know that because it was the last, if I remember correctly, it was the last amendment to the 8th schedule, and it was the 92nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 2003, where it added Bodo, Dogri, Maithili and Santali to the 8th schedule. But this question is not asking about the 92nd Amendment Act. It is asking about the 71st Amendment Act that happened in 1992. In the heat of the examination, I got really confused with that and I skipped this question. So even if I knew the fact that 92nd Constitutional Amendment Act or the latest amendment was there, and that included Maithili, Bodo, Dogri, Santali, and these languages I didn't know when exactly was the amendment made. But the fact you need to be keeping in mind was Maithili was the latest addition and latest amendment, and the latest amendment was 92nd Amendment, and prior to that 71st Amendment. So having that knowledge, actually that was required, that like everything that I knew was required, but I couldn't apply it. So I've taken this question to to exhibit in front of you that having the knowledge alone wouldn't help. You have to be extra cautious and you have to have some clarity about these things. And just eliminating Maithili would have given me the right answer, but I couldn't attend this question because I got confused between this 92 and 92nd Amendment because I forgot the dates. So learn these things very clearly, especially these schedules and the amendments to that. I wouldn't recommend you go and read each and every amendment. That's not required. But since UPSC have asked about 8th schedule, it's worth looking into 8th schedule. Other than that, I wouldn't recommend you go and study each and every amendment. But 8th schedule is important, 10th schedule is important, and the amendments to 10th schedule and 8th schedule and their dates are important. Sorry. So that's how you should be solving this question. So same way, another pattern is also there in 2024 itself, that Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam. This is a very popular, very important bill and an act that was passed during that time, and most of the provisions regarding this will be very much evident, and anything that is very much in news that is very important, UPSC will be asking the fine details. Same thing that was asked about MP Lads Fund, because there was a controversy regarding MP Lads Fund, and similarly if regarding GST Act. So any constitutional amendment act that is been introduced in that year or year prior to that, when you are writing this examination, if you are in 2026, if 2025 constitutional amendment act is there, you have to be very careful about almost all the provisions. Okay, but I recommend you stick to these patterns, like when will that be implemented, and the number of what exactly is the chronological order of that constitutional amendment, and what exactly are the provisions, if there is any timeline mentioned, or if it's regarding a fund, whether it's lapsable or non-lapsable, things like that. So this is very important, because at first sight you may think that okay, the provisions of Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam will be applicable from the 18th Lok Sabha, but the 18th Lok Sabha was the one that is constituted in 2024 itself, but the provision explicitly mentions that delimitation has to happen, and for that census has to happen. Then only this division of seats or division or reservation of constituencies can take place. So this is explicitly not the right statement, and UPSC is very, it's not going very hard on that. Eliminating that statement itself will give you the right answer. You don't have to learn about anything else. But instead of this, maybe this 15 years will have been the key thing that UPSC will be looking at. So constitutional amendment, be very careful about the timelines, explicit provisions mentioned, or something that is exclusive to that constitutional amendment. Be very careful. UPSC will be going into the detail, and you cannot actually work around with the logic in that particular question, because it will be strictly factual, and it's not worth missing on that question, because everybody will be attending this question and most of them will be getting it right, because constitutional amendments will be in news and they will be repeatedly asked in the test series as well as in the current affairs. So you have to go into the details in the Constitutional Amendment Act in that particular year or an year prior to that. Okay. Also keep track of the constitutional amendment after this, like starting from the 100th constitutional amendment to the whatever constitutional amendment act, that is the most recent. Especially in this case, I think, up until the 106 or 107 or whatever the number, whenever you are writing this examination, keep track of all that constitutional amendment act with the year and the provisions. Okay, because UPSC can ask about these, especially starting from the 100. They won't be going to the details prior to that, but starting from 100, it's very relevant. Then again, this is a case of switching up of dates. Okay, Constitution Day. Constitution Day is celebrated on 26 November every year. You may know or you may not know, but yeah, it's fine. But the key aspect UPSC is checking is whether or not you know that Constitution was adopted, or Constitution on 26 November 1949, whether the drafting committee was set up. This date is right, but it's not the date about setting up of drafting committee, because it's the date in which drafting committee actually adopted the constitution, or drafting committee completed the constitution and the Constituent Assembly adopted the constitution. Okay, this is the date in which Constituent Assembly adopted the constitution, not the drafting committee was set up. Drafting committee was set up in 25th August 1947. It was 2 years prior to that. So remember that this date is right only, but it's not regarding drafting committee setup. It was regarding the adoption of the constitution. So pay close attention to that again. But this question can be dealt logically, because if you know that India officially, like, we properly adopted the constitution and become a republic in 1950, January 26. This 26 November and January 26 hardly has got 2 months between them, and setting up of drafting committee and then completion of that constitution within these 2 months is next to impossible. We know that it took almost 2 years to complete the constitution. This question can be dealt logically, but pay close attention to the dates. Okay, so this is wrong, and you can easily arrive at the answer as C. So that's also one more thing. Then the classic one, like I said, this question deals with constitution, mentioning whether or not that body is mentioned in the constitution. Constitution of India defines civil and contempt and civil contempt. We know that constitution rarely defines things, especially even the important ones like office of profit, things like that. They are not clearly defined in the constitution, and you can assume that contempt and civil and criminal contempt won't be defined in the constitution. It will be followed by the Contempts of Court Act only. So eliminating that will be giving you a 50-50, and the fourth statement is fairly harmless and you can easily arrive at the answer. So this is again a pattern that UPSC is repeated, and again the same thing. This is in 2022. In 2021, it's regarding RBI. Certain provisions in the Constitution of India give the central government the right to issue direction. No mentioning of RBI is there in Constitution, because RBI is not a constitutional body. So this is a wrong statement, and we can easily arrive at the answer as C. Again, fairly simple if you know that it's not mentioned in the Constitution, and mentioning of the Constitution, there are only few things that are clearly mentioned in the Constitution that are defined in the glossary of the Constitution. Apart from that, most of the things are not mentioned in the Constitution, or not mentioned or not defined in the Constitution. So that's all about it. In polity questions, pay close attention to these things, and one very easy way to master this thing is not by reading which all things are mentioned in the Constitution. Two ways you can approach it, like a combination of 2 steps. One would be to go through the PYQs in which all bodies UPSC have already asked these questions. Second, try to solve as many test series as possible, and the test series that should be aligning with the exam pattern. I recommend the Gallant test, obviously, because I have already exemplified how well aligned the questions are in regard to the UPSC pattern, because it is being prepared by veterans who have been giving multiple attempts at these prelims and clearing the prelims very easily, and they are very much aware about the patterns in which UPSC is setting the questions. So we are investing our time into framing these questions in a way that attending the Gallant test will give you the edge in actually clearing the prelims. So I highly recommend take a good test series like our Gallant test and master the areas like polity, economy and science and tech very easily. Okay, so you don't have to worry much about learning things. So do by solving questions, you can easily internalize them and remember them. Otherwise it gets slightly tricky if you are learning facts and not taking the test series. I highly recommend take the test series and be very thorough with these concepts, so that you don't make silly mistakes. Again, this is another area that UPSC is repeatedly asking. 2024 PYQ is there. there is 2023 PYQ. It's regarding the scheduled areas, and the same question is being asked. It's the basic concept of both the questions are very same. Like nothing is out of the box or anything. That it is the governor of the state who recognizes, declares any community of that state as scheduled tribe. We know that governor and president has a role in declaring of scheduled areas and scheduled communities, but it's obviously not the governor. We know that president is the one entrusted with the duty of declaring them. So a classic mix-up there happens. Instead of president, governor will be given, or instead of governor, president will be given, or instead of governor, some other body like chief minister will be given. So scheduled areas, pay close attention, especially president, governor or any minister is mentioned. You have to be extra cautious whether they are the ones doing that, and for that you have to learn about these scheduled areas. So declaration and definition, everything is done by the president, and the report is submitted by governor. And then a community declares a scheduled tribe in a state need not be so in another state. Fairly logical, that's true only, and we can arrive at the answer. This question, look at it. This has been asked in 2024. Just a year before that, same question has been asked about scheduled areas. Within a state, notification of an area as a scheduled area takes place through an order of president. Same logic. Okay. This is asking about scheduled tribe declaration, and this is regarding scheduled area. But the concepts are same only. Whether the declaration or recognition of a community as a scheduled tribe or declaration of scheduled area, the concepts are same only. It's the president who is doing that. And then the largest administrative unit forming the scheduled area is the district, and lowest is the cluster of villages of block. Say fairly harmless, straightforward, right only. Chief ministers of the concerned state. Again, I told you, like if anybody who's mentioned, like if president is mentioned, we have to look through whether it's really president or governor. You have to look through that. If any ministry or minister is mentioned, you have to look through whether it's governor, president or that minister. In most cases, ministers have very little role in these scheduled areas. It's mostly regarding governor who will be reporting or giving the report to the president, and president will be declaring these areas. So this is wrong only, and we can arrive at the answer as only 2. So mention and pay close attention. Anything that is asking about scheduled tribes, scheduled areas, governor, president, okay, or any minister, just pay close attention to that, because the roles of them can be interchanged. So that's all about the polity side of things. Now moving on to the economy. Here the classic one will be buying and selling, increase or decrease. Instead of increase, they will be decreasing because appreciation, depreciation, or buying and selling of government securities, things like that. A classic mix-up will be given, and many times aspirants will be confusing it. I have seen that, in normal scenarios, if the same question has been asked to an aspirant, they will be knowing it as back of their hand. But in the heat of the examination, they tend to confuse it, and UPSC will take advantage of that. First one, if inflation is too high, Reserve Bank is likely to buy government securities. We all know that it's not buying, it's selling. But many times aspirants will think that, okay, they may overthink. Okay, if inflation is high, they will be buying government securities. But in reality, buying government securities infuses liquidity into the market, and selling absorbs the liquidity. Having that concept itself is that all is required for solving this question. You don't have to read anything other than that, and you can easily arrive at the answer as B. Again, the second one, if the rupee is rapidly depreciating, RBI is likely to sell dollars in the market. If instead of selling, UPSC may give in next year as buy. Pay close attention, underline and think. Okay, don't connect multiple statements, multiple concepts in the first question into the economy part. Okay, first read the statement. Like if I am to analyze this particular statement, if the rupee is rapidly depreciating, okay, rupee is rapidly depreciating, you have to write or try to in the rough pages of the question paper, you have to write it as rupee depreciating. Put an arrow. Then okay, what will be the course of action? You have to write it, your answer, and then compare it. Otherwise, you may overthink. You may try to connect one concept with the other, and you will be confusing everything. And at the end, you will be losing more time for this one single question. This happens with many aspirants. So, if you haven't attended a real-time examination, you may think that, okay, what's the issue with this? But trust me, I am speaking from my experience. Aspirants tend to confuse it, even if they have very good understanding about the concepts. So, buying, selling, appreciation, depreciation, high, low, things like that. pay close attention, write it down. If it gets too much confusing, write it down in the rough areas of the question paper. And this one, classic one, like I mentioned, credit rating agencies are regulated by Reserve Bank of India. If anything regarding any body is being asked and Reserve Bank of India is given, try to think whether SEBI is whether SEBI can do such things, or SEBI, in your understanding, is SEBI capable of doing that thing? If SEBI is capable of doing that thing, most likely SEBI will be the answer instead of RBI. And vice versa is also right. Something that is being asked about provisions of RBI and SEBI will be given, and the answer would be RBI only. So switching between RBI and SEBI is a classic way of UPSC's way of asking questions. So that's very important, and that's all it's required. Credit rating agencies are not regulated by SEBI, and you can easily arrive at the answer as B. Okay, so that's the usual thing, classic thing. So remember that in economy. And apart from these, subject-wise trend, there is a general trend. Almost all the patterns that I have discussed, there is a general trend, especially in science and technology. See, in 2023, this question is being asked: ballistic and cruise missiles. They are distinctly different kind of missiles, but if you don't have an understanding, you can easily confuse them. Ballistic ones are the ones that have a parabolic trajectory, and they are only, they are projected in the outer atmosphere, then they are driven by the gravity only. Whereas cruise missiles, they are propelled throughout their journey. But this statement is switched. Instead of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles are given, and instead of ballistic missile, cruise missiles are given, and that is wrong. Again, Agni 5 is a medium range cruise missile. No, it's a ballistic missile, and BrahMos is the cruise missile. Again, both of the statements given are interchanged. They are right only, interchanged, and D is the answer. Pay close attention, especially these ballistic missiles are being asked, and names of the ballistic missiles. Okay, ballistic and cruise missiles. Okay, don't confuse between ballistic and cruise missiles. Have a clear idea, and be very thorough with the examples. Like Agni, like BrahMos is a cruise missile. Having that understanding alone will help you eliminate these options and arrive at the answer. Again, this thing. This may seem like UPSC will be framing a question in such a way that you may think that this is right, because like the first one, lions do not have a particular breeding season. Okay, we don't know. Unlike most other cats, cheetahs do not roar. If you know that cheetahs can only growl, then that's fine only. That's right only. This third statement is what I'm very much curious about, because unlike male lions, male leopards do not proclaim their territory by scent marking. At first reading, you may think that okay, there might be some peculiarity about these leopards, like cheetahs. Since cheetahs do not roar and other big cats roar, we may think that okay, leopards are also very peculiar. But just imagine, the house cat does the same thing, or almost all the animals that we see around us does the same thing. Then what's the specialty of these male leopards to not do that? Everybody, like dogs, cats, everybody does the territory by scent marking. So this is not a factual, like this is not at all right statement, but it is been presented to you in a way that you may think that this is right. So again, try to be wary about these statements, and eliminating that will give you the right answer. Okay, so that's all. Again, this is another thing from history. Since when it comes to historical things, we have the assumption, and which is in most scenarios right only, the role of women. We may assume that okay, role of women were like they are not very much part of the social strata. They are not very active in the social activities, and we may think that okay, they won't be participating in wrestling. Okay, this is one area that we tend to assume, and many times it's right, because in our imagination the later Vedic age is set as the benchmark of our the past history, and we may think that okay, women are there has been a strict gender discrimination, and the status of women were not that high. Even in the modern India also we are seeing things like that. So we may assume that wrestling won't be there. Okay, and we will be easily eliminating that thing. But here you have to be wary about the empire in question or the context in question. That is the important part, because if a progressive empire is in question, and role of women will be high, and there will be very less discriminatory or inhumane practices like slavery, things like that. So if a progressive empire or a very civilized empire is in question, consider it as a modern society and try to analyze it in that lens. Okay, so be very careful about the empire in question before jumping into conclusions. Okay, so this is right only, and we will be arriving at the answer as D. This is another area where there used to be a trend where almost all the answers given in the science and technology application will be right, and many a times it's like that only, especially if you ask about in which all technology this technology finds its application in which among the following. Many a times it's right only, because anything can find application in other areas. But there can be questions like these where not all will be the right answer, and this requires some understanding, but you don't have to be very critical about it. The reason why I have taken this question is to warn you that unlike geography, where I have told you to be very critically analytical about the questions, in science and technology you don't have to be very critical, you just have to have a general understanding. Because if you keep on critically analyzing each and everything, you may go wrong with the options. Because in this question, identification of narcotics on passengers at airport or an aircraft is not an application of radar, and only two will be, the rest of the two are the answer. But I'm telling you, and I have taken this question purposefully to warn you that don't go by that logic, that there will be one thing that will be purposefully given wrong by the UPSC. No, you have to have an idea that what is radar. Okay, it's radio detection and ranging. So they'll be sending a radio signal, and based comparing the signal that is being sent and received, we will be making an interpretation based on that. Mostly used in tracking, monitoring, especially in this tracking of missiles, fighter aircraft, etc., and other applications just like this precipitation, tracking of animals, etc. But this is not something that can be easily applied, or if you look at it, it's not easily applicable in narcotics. An X-ray machine or something of that sort will be able to identify narcotics, but not radars. So that's the thing. But don't go by the critical logic in science and technology portion. If application of something is given, most likely there is a good chance that it finds application in much wider areas, and most options will be right. I'm not saying that it's the case always, but in many a times applications about any technology will be much they will be having a much diverse applications. So across the domains, like even in environment or maybe biotechnology, they will be having multiple applications. So most scenarios there will be a diversity of applications, and most scenarios almost all the statements will be right. But there can be statements like these where that won't be right. But I won't recommend you be very critical about the science and technology. Just use your logic, just try to picturize it, whether these things can be applied in any way. If they can be applied in any way according to your understanding, that will be right only. Okay, take it like that only. Moving on, anything regarding celestial bodies or astronomical phenomena, you have to be little careful, because many times logic won't be that applicable. And while I have discussed the science and technology portion, especially these celestial bodies, I told you that if you don't know things factually, it's better to stay away. Okay, because things can go wrong, and not much logic is applicable when it comes to these celestial bodies, because the questions that UPSC generally asks are slightly on the factual side. First statement, like giant stars live much longer than dwarf stars. If you imagine that giant stars are larger bodies, dwarf stars are smaller bodies, you may think that okay, they have got larger mass, so they will be living longer. But that's not the right thing. The celestial phenomena goes the other way around. Giant stars have much lesser lifespan than dwarf stars. So this is the wrong statement, and we can arrive at the answer as D. So I've taken this question purposefully to warn you that questions about celestial bodies will most likely be factual. Try to think about it based on available logic, available knowledge, and your logic. And if you if you can find a confident answer, go and mark it. But other than, if you are not very confident, or if you cannot arrive at a 50-50, try to stay away. Okay, that's one thing I highly recommend when the questions about celestial bodies in science and technology is being asked. This is one area where I got absolutely confused. It was in 2024, so I have taken this purposefully, because how many at first reading I didn't actually read this 2023 part, and I marked everything because I knew all of this will be in the World Heritage Site of UNESCO. But UPSC has purposefully asked how many of the above properties were included in 2023. Right now, looking at the question, I cannot imagine how I missed it. But in the actual examination, in that paper, I actually couldn't read this 2023. The only thing I could understand was how many of the properties were included in the World Heritage Site, and almost all the properties I have seen in the World Heritage Site. But if only I have paid some attention to 2023, I could have easily arrived at the answer, because I know that Rani Ki Vav, it's included in the Heritage Site much earlier. Mahabodhi Temple Complex much earlier. So Hoysalas, this was in news actually. Shanti Niketan and Hoysalas were in news, and I knew this, but I missed this 2023 and I marked it as all 4, where in reality the answer was only 2. This is where paying close attention really matters. Now you may think that what is there to miss this? Imagine this question as at the end of the paper or at the corner of the paper. When this question is being asked, in the right side corner of the paper, you might miss it. There is a good chance for things like that to happen. That's why I have purposefully taken this question, and I've acknowledged that even I have marked it wrong. So don't make these mistakes. Pay close attention to these dates. Try to underline it or mark it. Okay, otherwise you will be missing it and making the same mistakes that I have did. So that's all about it. These are the common patterns in which UPSC has been asking questions and setting questions. So by this session, I intend to give you a good idea on how to approach these questions and how to fine tune your logic and perfect that logic, so that you have a better chance of attending these questions and clearing this examination. So that's all about it. So watch out for these mind games, and don't worry, we'll be able to clear this examination if you have a decent factual base and a good mind, like composed mind. You'll be able to clear it. So don't be alarmed by any of this. I am giving you a heads up so that you don't have to be alarmed at the actual examination. I am just giving you a warning so that you can be better prepared, and a better prepared composed mind is all that is required to clear this prelims. So that's all about it. Thank you and have a nice day.